Hey everyone, welcome front. Wait, no, that doesn't sound right. Hey everyone, welcome side. No, it's not it. It's not it either. Welcome back. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Van Build series. If you saw my last video, you may or may not have seen me eat poop. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch it now. If you did, I'm not really sure how I'm going to top that. If you're new to the channel, my name's Dalton. I'm building this van out here into a tiny home, and this episode is going to be how I installed these super awesome walls. We have yet another brutal 75-degree winter day here in San Diego. It's a big week for the van build. Throwing in these cabinets here, that's why the van looks like a complete disaster right now. But it's going to be well worth it, and more on that video in the future. So with that said, let's have at it. I do believe that the definition of a wall was actually lost in translation eons ago.
No, it wasn't.
Huh?
That's actually not correct.
Okay, so I'm being told that's actually incorrect. Well, it looks like the definition is actually right here. So, okay, look at that, Mr. Know-It-Wall. Well, what is a wall but a continuation of the ceiling anyway? Which is exactly what I did here in my van. I just kept building the ceiling, but I did it sideways, and before I knew it, a wall was born. Just like the emotional walls you put up to keep your loved ones at arm's reach, your van also needs walls. These walls provide a variety of benefits. Number one, they hold the insulation in place so it isn't blowing around your van. Number two, they provide a frame for the electrical outlets and switches. And number three, they can even keep you safe from Mongolian invaders. If you were from Imperial China many years ago, which you're probably not if you're watching this now, so never mind. Walls, if done poorly, can make your van go from modern studio home on wheels to post-apocalyptic zombie van. And not like a cool zombie van where you're the hero of the story, more like one where you got eaten face first by a zombie in a gas station. I opted to use the same cedar panels on my walls that I used on the ceiling. So the installation process is very similar. So if you haven't seen the installation video for my ceiling yet, I suggest you go back and watch that now, as it's going to help you follow along in this one. If you don't care, I'll still provide a brief explanation of how I attach those cedar panels anyway. Some things you're going to need for this project. You need a couple different tools, starting with a cordless drill. That's what I used. I used wood screws. You could exchange your cordless drill for a nail gun and instead use finishing nails. I just had the wood screws and the drill already, so that's what I used. In addition to that, you're going to need a saw to cut the panels. I think a jigsaw works really well here in case you have any weird shapes, or you could probably also get away with a circular saw or maybe even a table saw. For materials, you're going to need these 1/4-inch cedar panels, you're going to need 1/4-inch plywood, and then depending on your tool of choice, you're going to either need wood screws or finishing nails. You're also going to want a hefty dose of motivation, energy, patience, and Dalton's adventures before beginning this project. So when I decided to build my walls, I started with the doors out of sheer laziness. They seemed like a smaller task to me and one that I could probably get done easier, and that felt good to me, so I started with the doors. So I grabbed my 1/4-inch plywood and got to it. Like all good stories, it begins from the rear. Don't mind my computer sitting here, it's just my talking points for this video. Breaking down the van wall here, as the saying goes. So covering the lower portion of the doors on my Promaster was really easy. I measured side to side, I drew a square, I cut it out, I rounded the corners a little bit, sanded it, and then just ran 4 self-drilling metal screws into that to hold it in place. Not much to it. The top was a little trickier as it's a funky shape. I have no idea what that shape's called. I taped some paper together like I was in preschool art class. I traced the outline, and then I took my outline, I cut the edges off with a lightsaber. You could use like scissors or a box cutter. I just had a lightsaber, so I opted to use it. Now that I had that stencil, I could plop it onto some wood, trace the stencil, then cut it out with my jigsaw about 423 times before finally getting it right. But I'm just going to show you guys the clip where I got it right, so it looks like I got it done in one go. Nobody will ever know my little secret. Besides, of course, you guys. Time to move on to the sliding door. So with the side door here, let's start up top and thank your lucky stars. It's another rectangle. Measure top to bottom, side to side, wham bam, thank you ma'am, and I'm spent. The middle door piece gets a little trickier. It's mostly rectangular, but it has this little notch for the handle. Make sure you take your time and scribe it out if you have to. Whatever that means. After the middle piece, we have one more piece on the bottom of the sliding door, and wouldn't you know it, it's another rectangle. Cut, sand, screw, next. Now the doors are all finished. Congratulations, you completed door school with an advanced door degree. It's time to move on to Wall Street. If you're like me, you make mistakes too, like building a bed frame before the walls were installed. I don't know why I did this. I didn't even have a bed to put on top of the frame. I just did it. It just made the build way more difficult than it had to be. Now you're probably thinking, but Dalton, just take the bed frame out. It's like 6 pieces of wood. Can't take that long. It took me a precious 15 minutes to get those stupid pieces of wood level. So I just left them in because I couldn't bother to spend another 15 minutes leveling them out if I took them out and then went to put them back in. I don't know. I don't know why I do the things that I do. Why do I do the things I do? I don't know. Don't be like me. Save the bed for later. If you did go ahead and build a bed early because you too like a challenge, congratulations, because it's about to get challenging. Hi, buddy. Hi. So my big saving grace for the underbed van walls is that I knew I was going to have 2 giant objects kind of covering the edges, so I wasn't too concerned about cutting like perfect edges. I had a big wooden wheel well cover over on this side to cover up one of the walls, and I have a gigantic 28-gallon water tank on the other side to also cover up the wall. So what I did was cut as close to the shape of a wheel well as I could, and then I let both the water tank and the wheel well cover that up, and nobody knows that it actually looks terrible. If you had to make a wheel out of the shape I cut, it would be a bumpy ride to say the least. Honestly, it looked like a blind person cut them out. It looked like Helen Keller cut them out for me. It looked like a 5-year-old cut them out with scissors. It looked like someone had to carve them out with a butter knife. They didn't actually resemble the shape of a wheel at all, but they're all covered up, so you would never know. So yeah, I took that 1/4-inch plywood, I cut it into the loose shape of the wall down here. I covered it up with the wheel well and the water tank, and then I put 2x4s on the edges of it to cover up the crappy edges. And I called those bed support beams, but more so they're just to cover up my terrible woodworking. But again, nobody's really gonna see under the bed all that much. This was just to hold the insulation in place and house some wires, so I'm fine with it. Moving on to the bed. Get out of here. What are you doing? Get clear away for the camera. Sorry about that. So as you can see, we've got more rectangles here. Love a good rectangle in this van. What I did was these 1/4-inch plywood instead of the cedar panels. That's a little bit stronger. If I accidentally kick it in my sleep or if I hit it while I'm wrestling, I won't put a big hole through it. Whereas if I were to kick like the cedar, I think a stiff enough breeze could probably put a hole in that. Not actually, but it's definitely softer than the plywood. Also notice the bed walls are a little inset from the rest of the walls. I used a little bit less insulation around the bed because I wanted to recess those walls a bit and get a little bit of extra space. And it got me about an extra 2.5, 3 inches on either side. And 2.5 or 3 inches, depending who you ask, can actually be a lot. It's actually really big in some certain cases. So that's like combined almost 5 or 6 inches, which is massive. Yeah, freaking huge. I'll take a deeper dive into the building of the bed and why I did the things I do in that future video, but that's a brief version of it for now. So I just ran that into the frame there with a couple little metal screws, and then it's time to move up onto your cedar panels. Enough pillow talk. We're just gonna grab that ceiling and pull it on down to cover our wall. Make sure if you are using wood screws that you pre-drill your holes so we don't split these boards. They do have a tendency to split a little bit if not pre-drilled. Something of note, going from ceiling around the corner into the wall can be a little tricky. It feels like you're a barber giving a fade to a kid with a broccoli haircut. Even if the top looks terrible, we can still salvage the sides here. So take your time and don't rush this thing. If your corner panels aren't lining up perfectly with your ceiling panels, these do have the little tongues and grooves on them, so they offer a little bit of flexibility in that regard. You can loosen up a couple of your screws in each plank and just slide them over a touch to maybe line up better. Try it, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If you want to just say screw it because you're going to cover the corners up with shelves or some sort of gypsy tapestry anyway, then go ahead and do that. Honestly, it's probably easier that way anyway. So I continued doing the ceiling into the wall like this, above the bed on both sides. This one's gonna be covered by a shelf. I did it right over here in front, across from my sliding door, and then it really just kind of left me one more wall to cover up. Before we get to that lower wall to cover up though, I did just add some finishing cedar trim pieces on the edges. You can see them back there. They're in here too. I originally cut them longer than necessary, so it was just like these pieces were extended over to like right here, and that was going to cover up the plywood in here, but it looked like a hot pile of doo-doo, so I ended up just trimming them along the line here and then adding the finishing pieces right there, which I think looks a lot better. So all that was left here was to cut one more rectangle and throw it down at the bottom end of the wall here across from the sliding door. It's all covered up by a bench seat now, and I intentionally used that 1/4-inch plywood there because I knew it was going to be covered by a bench seat and storage. So once again, I didn't really care about the appearance. I didn't care about having the nice aesthetic of the cedar tongue and groove. I just wanted some sort of wood to cover the wires and cover the insulation. Once I installed that, I just had to drill out a quick hole in it with the hole saw to allow my ground connection to stay grounded, because that was where my ground connection is for my battery. It's feeling a little bit more cabiny than I originally intended, but I don't think that I have quite cabin fever yet. So I'm gonna run with it for now. I can always paint it or something to like maybe change up the aesthetic if I want in the future. Let me know if you guys have any questions about the process. If you enjoyed this video, all I ask is that you watch it 3 more times right now before you do anything else. See you next time. See you next time, everybody. Okay. Don't know why my mic just disconnected. More like one where you got eaten for. More like one where you got face. In addition to that. We've been trying to reach you about your extended van build series.